Hello, friends. Welcome to our weekly Data Talk, a show where we talk with data science leaders from around the world. We are super excited today because we're chatting with Dr. Seth Dobrin. He's the Chief Data Officer and Vice President for IBM Analytics. And today we're going to be talking about an article that he wrote along with Daniel Hernandez called Don't Let Data Science Become a Scam. If you've not read that article, you definitely got to check it out. Just Google Don't Let Data Science Become a Scam. It's a great read. Very, very fascinating. A lot of very informational content on leading data science teams, how to deal with mistakes. And we're super excited to chat with Dr. Seth Dobrin today. Seth, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This is, I'm looking forward to this. Should be fun.
Cool. So, Seth, our data science community always loves to learn about our guests. And I'm curious if you can kind of share your path in data science and what led you to do the work you're doing today.
Yeah, so I kind of have a meandering path, I guess, for lack of a better word. I actually got my PhD in molecular and statistical genetics a really long time ago.
Whoa.
Back then, more about in the 90s. And that was when R and Python were in their infancy. And so started using those tools way before version 1.0 on either of them. I had a career in startups and academics and industry. Really, my career is focused around basically industrializing existing tools, whether they're robotics, genetics, genetic tools, or algorithmic tools. I was just moved to IBM 2 years ago from Monsanto. And the last 5 years I was at Monsanto, I was involved in their digital transformation, including building a data strategy and a data science strategy, and even developing net new business models leveraging analytics, which led me to IBM in my current role, where I was hired to lead our own internal transformation for essentially our software and cloud group. Shortly after I joined, my boss wanted me to spend some time with our clients and kind of share my experiences having done this at a Fortune 500 company, what everyone else wants to do, right? All Fortune 500. So I spent that time flying around the world, literally several times, hundreds of clients. And I found, some interesting perspectives or ways, different executives and companies were approaching building data science or AI teams, which led me to the article that you want to discuss today, or the blog post.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So you have been, with IBM, you're flying all over the world, talking with tons of clients, looking at data science strategies, seeing what's working, seeing mistakes. What were some of the things that led you to write this article about sometimes data science can be considered a scam when not properly implemented?
Yeah, so, I guess, first of all, the most important thing is that, IBM's strategy depends on our clients being successful at this AI journey, right? This data science journey. The fact that we came to the realization that in 2 years' time, a lot of our clients are going to look back and say, well, this whole thing was a scam. We spent millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars, or some cases hundreds of millions of dollars on these programs and haven't created any value. So that was the first piece. In fact, the co-author on the piece, Daniel Hernandez, we were sitting in a meeting and he's like, so you're telling me data science is going to be a scam? And I argued with him for like 5 minutes and I said, you're right. So that conversation is really what led to this blog post. But ultimately, and I kind of go into this a little bit in the blog post, I'd sit down with executives or people that were responsible for building these data science programs, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but most of them, would build data science programs. They'd show up to a conference, they'd sit down to one of their buddies, whether it's a CIO or a CEO or a COO, and he'd talk to his buddy, and she'd say, I have 100 data scientists. And he'd go back and he'd say to someone sitting next to him, go hire 101 data scientists. No strategy, no plan on how they're going to measure it. And then they'd bring these data scientists in, and they'd say, go do data science-y stuff, not really understand what the point, what the purpose is, or how even to approach it. And then, most data scientists have an academic background, or learn through MOOCs or Kaggle, and especially those of us that came from an academic background. Data science is really about applying the scientific method to business problems, right? And so we approach things in experiments. And if you don't have a strategy for your experiments, they're just research projects, right? And they're not really industrialized. They don't get operationalized. And they're not measured in business ways, right? And so you need to figure out, how do you help guide these people who want to do experiments, because that's what you're hiring them to do, to relate those experiments to things with real business value, which gets to the strategy, right? So you need to understand what decisions your company makes, and how you want to apply AI to making those decisions, cheaper, faster, or more efficiently, right? More effective. And you measure those, and those decisions, every decision a company makes is actually tied to a value, right? Every decision has a value, and those values are associated with, cost savings, cost avoidance, or net new revenue, right? You can really boil it down to those three things. And so, building this decision portfolio, understanding the value of that decision, and then, each decision that's worth doing is not one model, it's many models, right? And so, this really gives you a framework to kind of say, as a metric system, not only do you have a value for your data science or your AI program, now you have a metric system. Am I realizing the value I said when I laid out this program? Which will help our clients in 2 years' time decide, did we realize the value or not? And so they'll now have a data-driven way, right, to understand, were they getting value from this program, and are they getting the right ROI?
You mentioned about maybe early on in the process, leaders are excited about the possibilities of AI. They see their competitors hiring data science teams, and so companies are hiring, like you said, let's bring in 100 data scientists. And sometimes things aren't thought through because they don't really know the possibilities, but they're just like, we need to invest in the space. Mistakes can happen, right? Like you said, it's an experiment. So if it's not set up properly, you've invested all this money into a data science team, hiring a lot of people, investing in technology, and then failure happens. And then now the leader's like resistant to obviously putting more money in because they've been burned. Yeah. So what's the next step after you've been burned? How do you make the case and build the confidence in the leader to let's try this again?
Yeah. So I think, getting back to that strategy and kind of mapping out what the real ROI is to the company, can help and it's usually not the leader that necessarily got burned that's resistant. I mean, those people, those are usually the ones that get it and want to do it. It's how do they convince the leaders around them? And I think having a real strategy, a real measurement system, real value associated with these programs is really important. And you don't even, if you have that all mapped out, you don't even really need to position it as a data science or AI program, right? You can position it as we are going to solve these problems for the company. So you deliver it at, position it as an outcome-based program that happens to use data and analytics to deliver those outcomes.
Okay. What advice would you give for the leaders out there that have not implemented a AI strategy? They want to avoid making mistakes. What would be your advice to them on ensuring the best success?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, we've talked about mistakes and things going wrong multiple times. I don't think mistakes are necessarily a bad thing, as long as you're self-aware and you learn from them, right? I tend to frame them not as mistakes, but as learning experiences. If you have the same learning experience twice, then it's a mistake, right?
I like that.
but you need to, or more than twice, but you need to realize that you're going down the wrong path or something's going wrong quickly, right? So I guess the first thing is, most companies are thinking about or talking about or doing agile. data science programs, just like any other development program, should be done in an agile manner, which means that you're going to get iterative sprints that are going to get value quickly, and you'll realize you're going down the wrong path or right path quickly. And from a management and leadership perspective, I feel you should approach them in the same manner, right? Iterative, you're not going to get the strategy right the first time. Even if you have someone that's done it come in, the culture's different, the environment's different, the business is different, it's bigger, it's smaller, it's more complex, it's less complex. And so, you know, someone like myself or a consultancy can come in and say, here's what you should do, right? Typically, you know, consultants have, you know, they come in, they have 3 models, they kind of fit those 3 models to the organization, you know, one of those 3 models to the organization. You know, I'm oversimplifying a little bit, right? But, you know, then it's not, you know, we shouldn't take those and implement them directly. We need to take those, digest it, and put it in the context of our company, right? Because again, every company is different. And so it's about customizing advice that you get from people that you bring in from the outside, whether they're new employees or consultants. And I think it's really about doing that, internalizing it, and then iteratively adjusting the program based on that. Now, one thing I feel very, very strongly about in any company that's, you know, of significant size, so let's just, you know, call it anyone in the Fortune 1000, the ultimate goal of the organizational structure of your data science or AI program to be a hub and spoke model, right? You should have a centralized team that organizes, builds the strategy, owns the strategy, has a core set of data scientists that work in there for kind of cross-enterprise problems or very risky problems. They also work on tool sets and defining guardrails. But then you have data science teams in the business, right? And you need those data science teams in the business, because as soon as you pull someone out of the business, a week later, they have no idea what's going on, right? Number one. Number two, you want people that are close to the results so they can drive the right outcomes for those businesses. And so you want to make sure you maintain that hub and spoke model. And then you have the leaders from those spokes that actually get involved in defining the strategy, doling out, you know, who is going to work on what use case, defining the technology platforms, because you don't want that to be an ivory tower type exercise. You want everyone to have an input and decide what those guardrails, you know, what's inside those guardrails. And, you know, the split, the way I like to split those up is, you know, the spokes take the less risky projects. So, you know, greater than 70% likelihood of success, and usually within your silo, right? The enterprise teams take on the riskier projects, you know, less than 70% likelihood of success, and tend to be spanning multiple business units or divisions in the company. And that kind of helps divide it up, the workload.
So your vision, I like this hub and spoke model you're talking about. What type of leaders should be involved in the hub? Like, what expertise is needed to ensure that this all works properly?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, the leader in the hub needs to, you know, be the kind of person that really likes to drive change. Does not want to be the most popular person in the company, right? Because you're asking people to step outside their comfort zone, and people are not necessarily going to be happy with you, right? So the goal is to change, not to be popular, and frankly, some people have struggled with that, right? They want everyone to like them. So I think that's one aspect that needs to be important. I think you want someone that has driven this type of transformation before. Doesn't necessarily have to be a data science or AI type transformation, but has driven a transformation before, because there's a certain level of, you know, buy-in and consensus that you need to reach, but there's also a point where you just need to make a decision and be able to drive that decision into the organization. And so it's different than other types of leadership. And so I think that is important. And then I think you either, depending on where this person sits, they either need, you know, if they sit in IT, it should be a business person, in my perspective. If it sits in the business, it should be a more technical person. And then they can surround themselves with people to augment their skills. And the reason for that is, you know, that gives you the credibility that you lack based on where you sit organizationally, right? You sit in IT, you're going to lack credibility with the business. You sit in the business, you're going to lack credibility with IT. So having a leader that's kind of not grown up in that space is really helpful.
Seth, what advice do you have for the person that's maybe in this position? They're trying to create change, trying to be innovative, but that can be very difficult sometimes when you're working for a really big company. I feel like being innovative and creative, you have more flexibility in a startup, small company, move fast, break things, but at a bigger company, there's a lot more governance, there's a lot more rules in place. What's your advice for a leader that wants to create change, be innovative, but is in a large, complex organization?
Yeah, so I think IBM's a large, complex organization. I tend to run all of my teams like they are a startup, right? We have a North Star. It's usually very aggressive. It's usually some unattainable goal, right? But you want to get there, right? And you realize you're not going to get there this year, or maybe not even next year. But so you kind of have this obscene North Star, and I think that's really important. And then you want to identify the people that get it, right? So there's people, your peers that are or senior leaders that get it. And when I say you have these decisions, there's a prioritization exercise that goes on. And you can prioritize it based on some kind, you create one of those quadrants, those 4 graphs with 4 quadrants in it. You have the size for different bubbles for different value, and you can just say we're going to pick the ones in the upper right hand corner with the biggest bubbles, right? When you're first starting out, that's not the way you do it, right? In my mind, to drive this change, you understand the people that get it, and you pick their projects. I don't care where they sit on your graph. I don't care how much value they have. Make them successful, because just like companies that leverage data and analytics and AI outperform those that don't, parts of companies that leverage it outperform those that don't as well. And so your goal is to make those people that get it immensely successful, so that whoever the more senior leader is that's sitting around the room with all these people reporting to them says, you want them to go, why aren't the rest of you doing what she's doing? Right? How come you're not leveraging these same tools that she is to help drive your business more effectively? And then that kind of is the best way, in my mind, to drive this change, because you start realizing value. It's measurable, it's quantifiable, and people can see it and feel it.
Seth, when you're hiring people for these leadership positions, you're looking at resumes. People have PhDs in different areas of maybe physics, biology, whatever. People who are very knowledgeable about programming languages. Aside from the skills that are needed, what are some of the personality traits that are really important to implement change and get things done? Like, what do you look for when you're bringing on a leader?
Yeah, so I guess first of all, I have about 50 people right now. Only 3 of us, including myself, have a PhD.
Okay. Okay.
I don't want people that are listening to think that everyone on your team has to have a PhD to do this. I think if you're building new algorithms, right, if you're really developing new mathematics that underlie this, yes, you need a PhD. If you're applying them, a master's degree, or, I had a guy that worked for me at my former company who had a high school degree, but he was phenomenal. He learned how to do all stuff in his garage. So it's really about the skills and the experiences more than it is the degree.
I like that.
And so I have a blog post that kind of lays this out as well that was published in VentureBeat. I can send you the link to that. But in terms of the soft skills, right? I think, I tend to be a little nepotistic in hiring my leaders, in that maybe they're not family members, right? But it's people that I know or I've worked with, and I understand their personality, or someone that I know and trust knows them and understands their personality, because you just can't get that from a resume. You can't get that in most cases from a short interview. When I have skill sets I can't fill, I will go out. But that's really gets to, you don't ask typical kind of types of resume of interview questions.
Yeah.
The more behavioral based questions, right? So I want a real example. We call them behavioral based interviewing skills, right? It's I want a real example of when you've done this. right? I want to understand, how you work through these problems before. And so it's real world experiences of how people have approached this in the past. I tend not to rely on references too much because,
that's
number one, I've had people that have been called troublemakers that just didn't get the right coaching and feedback, and they're actually the best employees.
Oh, that's fair.
I've had people that were viewed as great employees, but it's because they were conformists, right? They did what they needed to do within their little guardrails, and those aren't the type of people I necessarily want. So I will call references just to make sure there's nothing really odd going on, but I kind of don't really listen to them too strongly.
Oh, that's interesting. So it seems like you lean more towards the rule breakers.
I like the rule breakers. I like the people that push the boundaries, because that's what you need when you're, especially for leaders, that's what you need when you're driving the change.
That's cool. For the person who is not at a huge company, they're maybe at a smaller data science company, they're looking to build up a good data science team. What advice do you have for that leader who's bringing in data scientists and wants to make sure that their team is diverse and is going to be able to innovate?
Yeah, so I think you brought up a good point with diversity. So when my team hires, no one is allowed to even start interviewing until the pool of candidates that has at least 50% diversity in it. And
that's awesome. Why did you do that?
Because diversity of education, of gender, of ethnicity, of economic backgrounds, really there's articles that have proven that those teams outperform teams that are a single anything, whether even if it's all women or all African Americans or all white men, middle-aged white men, right? They will get outperformed by more diverse teams. So I think it's really important to have diversity. So for instance, our team, we have 50 people right now. We have 42% women. We have 10% Latino. We are lacking in the African American demographic, but that's the 42% women is about double.
That's awesome.
What I've seen for the average, right? And that's not because I said you have to hire 50% or 40% women. I just said your pool has to have 50% diversity, then pick the best one. So I think that's number one is, you got to start with a diverse slate. And then the second piece is I don't hire data scientists per se. I hire machine learning experts. I hire decision optimization experts. I hire data engineers. I hire data visualization / data journalism people, because I've known one unicorn in my entire life to do all these things. And so don't try and look for unicorns. They don't exist, number one. Number two, back to what I said earlier, you don't need a whole bunch of people with PhDs unless you are engineering new math to drive these things. Most of our team have masters. Like I said, 3 of us included. So I only have 2 people that work for me that have PhDs. And then we have a handful of people also that have bachelor's degrees, but they have a lot of really good experience. And we are building. So IBM has this initiative that Ginny Rometty, our CEO, started a few years ago called the New Collar Jobs Initiative. And it's a realization that, data and analytics and AI are going to displace a lot of blue collar workers. And how do we take these workers or the people that would fill into these jobs and train them for these new, essentially IT jobs? So we've recently created a apprenticeship for data science. We're waiting on the Department of Labor to approve it, but it's really people from blue collar backgrounds who want to get into this space. And so it's people that have been to, have 2-year degrees or maybe a high school degree or a bachelor's degree in some other field. We tend to focus on people from disadvantaged backgrounds because we want to fill it with that. So we're going to run our first 5 apprentices through this program as soon as it's approved by the Department of Labor. It's a 2-year program, a mix of classwork, right? We're using mostly MOOCs. We are using some face-to-face stuff. But more importantly, there's project work involved in it. So, you don't really learn anything until you put it to practice. And so, they'll learn math and linear algebra, or Python and linear algebra, and then there'll be a project they have to work on, right? And we kind of go through over 2 years over this program. So
that is so cool. Where can people learn more about this program?
So if you just Google IBM New Collar Jobs, there's a whole web page, and it's got all the different, I think there's like 13 or 14 different approved apprentices. The data science one is not up there yet because it hasn't been approved by the Department of Labor yet.
Okay.
Gets approved, it'll be up there. And I'm not sure if the posting is up yet. We haven't even started interviewing yet. So the posting for the data science one might still be up there. We've had quite a bit of interest in it. After a week, we had 500 applicants.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we're doing a pilot with 5 people, like I said, and then probably in 6 months, we'll learn from that, and we'll probably expand it. That way it'll give us enough runway to change things and get new people into the pipeline.
That is so cool. I love how forward-thinking IBM is with this, because that is so cool to help bring up this next generation of people who may be displaced from some type of work, but now you're looking to, like, how can we help bring on the important skill sets to help these people get into these data science roles.
Yeah, and every client, one of my peers at another company that I've talked to wants in on this, right? So I imagine in 6 months, once we have kind of validated the methodology, there's going to be, tens, if not hundreds of other companies, large companies doing this, because there's a skill set, and they also want that level of diversity this brings, and it brings good to the world, to the community. So it's got so many advantages going for it.
That's beautiful. Love that. Seth, one last question. We get one of the most popular questions we get in our data science community is from these smart young data scientists who are just finishing college. They're looking to get their very first job. They're going in for interviews, and they're looking for advice on how can I, nail the interview? How can I get this? How can I get this job? And I'm curious for you, since you've interviewed and hired so many people, what things stand out to you? Like, what maybe an interview is a person that you interviewed that just like knocked your socks off. This person like killed it. They did such a great job. I'm wondering what stands out to you in interviews, advice for these young data scientists.
Yeah, so there's a few different components of it. One is, kind of well, I'd start with your resume, right? I think avoid kind of buzzwords. Make sure there's a GitHub that has your real work in there, and maybe have a separate GitHub for work you want a potential employer to see, because a lot of us just kind of play around and have random stuff in there. So I would kind of focus it and have GitHub. Make sure it's got an entire pipeline. It's not just starting with clean data. How did you find data? How did you clean it up? Kind of that whole thing, and then even visualizing it, right? So that front end data prep and feature development is really the hardest part. Building models today is relatively easy, and what you do with those models is also really important, because in a business world, someone needs to consume it, right? So that's kind of getting someone to talk to you. I think that's potentially the hardest part, because there's so many people filtering in through these. The other piece is, a lot of these jobs have kind of pie in the sky. I want this person that has all these things, right? When there's a posting out there, we all realize that we're not going to get people with all these things. Don't look at these postings and say, I don't have everything, I'm not going to apply for it, right? Kind of say, if you have 50 to 75% of what they're looking for, I'd apply. The worst thing that'll happen is you'll get filtered out, right? But in most cases, I'd say you probably wouldn't be. In the interview process, I think I would, I get most impressed with people that have done some work that involves some kind of machine learning about IBM or about me or about, things that they've read. Like I had one guy, there's all these sentiment analysis tools out there that you can use to read text. She actually built a model to read my stuff on its own and compared it to the off-the-shelf stuff, right?
Wow.
So that was kind of cool, right? So build something.
Cool.
And you can build one thing, and if it'll learn about other people, right? So you can apply it to any job you have. So that's kind of fun and cool. And then, usually in these jobs, there's going to be some kind of, or there should be some kind of technical interview. If someone doesn't give you a technical interview, maybe you should think twice about if you want to work for them. And I think, someone who's going to do a good technical interview is going to push you until you don't know the answer to something. And don't be afraid to say, I don't know the answer. Can I Google it? Can I look on Stack Overflow? Right? Because what I want to see when I interview someone is I want to see you not know the answer and Google it. Right?
Oh, that's cool.
Because, I want, and this is going to sound funny, but I want people that are doing this work to be relatively lazy, right? I don't want them, recreating stuff that already exists, right? That's, go to GitHub, go to Stack Overflow, find the answer, copy and paste that code, right? Because that actually builds good development skills, because if you're going to reuse assets, that means you're going to create reusable assets that will accelerate your productivity in the future. So, I kind of jokingly say I want lazy developers, but really I want highly efficient developers, which means they're not going to redo stuff over and over again.
I love that.
Yeah. And then the final piece is just send a follow-up email. Even if you don't have their email, you can look up everyone on LinkedIn, say, hey, thanks for the interview. I really appreciate it. I learned something from the interview. Here's what I learned, right? Or something like that, some tidbit to say that, to show that you were interested in the process and interested in the role.
Yeah, that is solid, great advice. I love that you look for scrappy, gritty people, things that aren't looking to reinvent the wheel when they don't need to.
Yeah.
That just shows ingenuity and creativity, and I like that. Seth, thank you so much for your time. You've shared so much valuable information for both leaders and people looking to get in the field. For those that want to get in touch, contact you, connect with you, follow the work, your articles, things that you're doing, what's the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, so my Medium is at S Dobrin, Dobrin, and my LinkedIn is the same. So, and my Twitter is the same. So you can go on any of those and just look and just add at S Dobrin for whatever the appropriate format is for that medium.
Okay, wonderful. What I'll do is, for those listening to the podcast, I'll create a redirect to Seth's LinkedIn profile so you can follow him there. The short URL would just be ex.pn/Dobrin, Dobrin, and that'll just redirect over to Seth's profile where you can just follow him and see the things that he's working on. And definitely you want to be commenting on his posts and engaging with him there. Seth, thank you so much for your time. Awesome chatting with you, and hope we can chat again soon.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you inviting me on here. Have a great day.
You too.